Welcome, everyone, to episode 114 of Complete Liberty Podcast. Yes, that's 114 episodes so far. And we have an old co-host on the show.
Hey, Wes.
Hey, Paul.
Yes, and it's good to be back.
How's it going, Paul?
It's going great.
Nice.
I'm going to Pork Fest this summer.
Oh, yeah. I've heard various things about Pork Fest. I actually went to one back in the summer of 2006.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. A few moons ago, I went up there with a friend, Rob Batten, from, he was in Keene temporarily for the time, but we drove up from Concord up to Lancaster, which is where it is now. I guess this time around it's going to be up there too.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm going to be sharing a cabin with no less a personage than Larkin Rose.
Oh, awesome. Right on. That sounds like a good time. I think there's going to be a lot of revelry going on there and merriment.
And I'm getting a lift from Cleveland, where my parents live, out to New Hampshire from Jason Osborne.
Oh, excellent. Cleveland, Ohio, huh?
Yeah.
I remember driving through Cleveland when I drove out to New Hampshire.
Best location in the nation.
The spring of 2006, yes. And Cleveland, I think Reason has done a series of videos about Cleveland, about how it's so dilapidated and it's been desecrated by government, basically.
Yeah, that's true of a lot of places. They've gone through a bunch of changes.
Mm-hmm. It's up there with Detroit, I think, for the most chaos by government.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you get those socialists in power. They think that passing more laws and taking more money away from the working man is going to make things better.
On the other hand, the conservatives, the Republicans, who are supposedly in favor of less taxes and less regulations and all that jazz, that's usually just to increase the coffers, the revenue that government brings in, so-called revenue, which is an insult to business people everywhere. But, you know, you've heard that refrain that if we just cut taxes, then government can actually bring in more money because the economy is more productive then.
Yeah, they realize that if they put the livestock in more comfortable pens, they'll be more productive, and there's more of their produce we can steal.
Little greener pastures helps a lot.
Of course, they don't like to talk about it like that.
No. And that's what Ayn Rand really criticized the conservatives about, this sort of altruistic premise and the inconsistency that they have in regards to politics. She tried to work with various people in that movement. Goldwater was one of them, I guess. But she soon came to the realization that it's a lost cause, and actually the conservatives, the people that are for limited government, are a worse problem than the people who want full-on statism, because they are using language of liberty to promote more tyranny, essentially, or the crux of tyranny, which is taxation, regulation, controlling people through collectivistic means like voting and districts and just the way things are set up by government, control of the infrastructure and so forth. So if you're new to this podcast is about complete liberty, which is getting rid of all this party politics stuff and looking beyond the everyday into a world in which people honor their own self-ownership. They practice self-ownership. In order to do that, of course, you need to have your fellow human beings acknowledge that. And unfortunately, the people in government don't acknowledge the nature of self-ownership. They do on a surface level, perhaps. They let you determine what kind of clothes you're going to wear, what kind of car you want to drive, as long as you pay the right fees for the registration and all that good stuff. But as far as making fundamental choices with your property as a sovereign person, making your own choices like a big boy and big girl, yeah, it's not really recognized as such, is it?
Yes, this culture has developed the mechanism for instilling into the populace a cognitive dissonance that is very difficult for people to even see, much less fight with, because once you're unaware of the shackles that you wear, you will obviously be able to do nothing about removing them.
Or maybe if you're subconsciously aware of them, you'll be able to pretend like you don't have shackles on, right?
Well, that's all part of the mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
It's very carefully constructed, and even those people who are part of the infrastructure aren't aware consciously of what's going on, but somehow they studiously avoid any discussions of this because subconsciously, yeah, they really get it. But they feel like they have no other alternative. So it's like this classic phrase of, can't get ahead, can't get even, and can't get out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what those in power instill in the culture so that they stay in the game and, quote unquote, make the best of it.
Yeah, and they end up supporting the very system that tyrannizes them and strips them of their ability to make their own choices with their own property. So I